When my daughter-in-law told me they needed to talk about rent, I smiled instead of crying. I didn't plan that smile. It came out on its own, like something my face had learned to do after years of holding things in. At that moment, I was standing in my own kitchen, the same kitchen where I had raised my son, the same kitchen where I had stood on tired feet, cooking dinners late at night, telling myself that love was enough to make everything work. The kettle was still warm. The afternoon light was soft, falling gently through the window. And yet, something inside me went very still, because deep down, I already knew. This conversation was not really about rent. It was about my place in their lives. My name is Eleanor. I'm 71 years old, I'm a mother, and for most of my life, I believed that family meant sacrifice. I believed that if you gave enough, stayed patient enough, stayed quiet enough, you would be loved in return. That belief shaped my whole life. It helped me survive, and it slowly broke my heart. I wasn't always this quiet. When I was young, I had dreams like anyone else. Nothing big, nothing dramatic. I wanted a warm home, a steady marriage, a family that felt safe. I grew up believing that happiness came from stability, not excitement. That belief followed me into adulthood. I met my husband, Michael, when I was 23. He was gentle, soft-spoken, reliable in a way that made the world feel less frightening. We didn't fall in love loudly. We grew into love slowly. He liked routine, I liked peace. Together, we built a simple life. Our house wasn't fancy, but it was full of quiet mornings, full of shared meals, full of the kind of comfort you only notice when it's gone. When Daniel was born, everything changed. He came into the world on a rainy October morning. I remember holding him, feeling his tiny fingers curl around mine, and thinking one clear thought: I will protect you from everything. Michael was a good father. Not the loud kind, not the playful kind, the steady kind. He worked hard. He came home on time. He loved quietly. We didn't have much money, but we had peace. I thought that was enough. Then one evening, Michael didn't come home. Daniel was 12. I was making dinner when the phone rang. A stranger's voice, careful words, a sentence that split my life in half. Heart attack. Sudden. No warning. One moment, I was a wife. The next, I was a widow standing in a kitchen that suddenly felt too large. That night, Daniel slept in my bed. I didn't tell him everything would be okay. I didn't know if it would be. I just held him and let him cry. Sometimes that is the only honesty you can offer. From that day on, it was just the two of us. I became strong because I had no choice. I worked longer hours. I learned how to stretch money. I learned how to hide my fear behind routine. I smiled when I was tired. I nodded when I was scared. I told myself that sacrifice was love. Daniel grew kind, gentle, thoughtful. He was the kind of boy teachers praised and friends trusted. He didn't cause trouble. He didn't ask for much. He wanted approval. I thought that meant I was doing something right. I built my whole life around him. His school, his meals, his future. I didn't resent it. I was proud. I told myself this was what mothers were meant to do. When Daniel told me he had met someone, I was happy. He came home smiling in a way I hadn't seen before. Her name is Lena, he said. She's confident. She knows what she wants. That sentence stayed with me longer than it should have. The first time Lena came to our house, she looked around carefully. Not rudely, just observantly. She noticed details. The furniture, the photographs, the way things were arranged. She complimented the food. She praised Daniel. Then she looked at me and said, "You raised him well." I smiled. That one sentence made me feel seen. They dated for 2 years. I tried not to interfere. I told myself that good mothers step back. I welcomed Alina into my home, into our routines, into our lives. She was polite, independent, very certain of herself. Everything I wasn't. When Daniel told me they were engaged, I cried. Happy tears. I hugged him tightly and told him how proud I was. I helped plan what I thought would be a wedding. I saved money. I looked at venues. I even bought a dress. Navy blue. Simple. Elegant. I imagined standing quietly in the crowd, watching my son begin a new life. But plans kept changing. We're keeping it small, Daniel said. We don't want stress. I understood. Or at least, I told myself I did. After what I believed was an upcoming wedding, they moved into a small apartment. Rent was high, jobs were unstable. They struggled. When they asked if they could stay with me for a while, I didn't hesitate. Family helps family. That belief was deeply rooted in me. At first, it felt nice not to be alone. Shared dinners, soft laughter, life in the house again. Lena reorganized things. I let her. She changed routines. I adapted. I told myself this was modern family life. Slowly, though, I began to feel smaller. Decisions were made without me. Plans happened without asking. When I spoke, conversations paused, politely but noticeably. I blamed myself. Older people often do. I told myself I was sensitive, that this was my problem, that love required flexibility. One evening, I overheard Lena on the phone. She still acts like it's her house, she said quietly. I froze behind the hallway wall. She means well, Lena continued, laughing softly. But she needs boundaries. That word stayed with me. Boundaries. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Not angry, just sad. I realized then that something was shifting, and I didn't know how to stop it. After that night, when I overheard Lena talk about boundaries, I tried to convince myself it didn't matter. I told myself people talk, they vent, they say things they don't fully mean. I reminded myself that Lena was young, confident, used to independence. I was older, set in my ways. It was easier to believe the problem was me. The next morning, I woke up early as always. Habit is a strange thing. Even after retirement, my body still remembered the years of responsibility. I made coffee. I stood at the kitchen window. I watched the street wake up. For a few quiet minutes, everything felt normal again. Then I heard their bedroom door open. Lena walked into the kitchen first. She was already dressed, already alert, already somewhere else in her mind. "Good morning," I said softly. She nodded. "Morning." No smile, no warmth, just acknowledgement. Daniel followed a few minutes later. He poured himself coffee, kissed Lena's cheek, and checked his phone. I watched them without saying anything. They stood close to each other, comfortable, certain. And suddenly, I felt like someone passing through my own life. Daniel had always been gentle with me. Even now, he wasn't unkind. He just was a distance that hadn't existed before. When I spoke, he listened politely, the way you listen to someone you respect but no longer rely on. I missed the boy who used to talk to me about everything. As weeks passed, the house changed slowly, not through arguments, through small shifts. Lena reorganized cabinets, moved items, labeled shelves. She didn't ask, she informed. I told myself this was practical. I told myself it didn't matter. But every time I opened a drawer and found something moved, I felt a quiet loss. This house had once known my hands. Now it was learning someone else's. Daniel worked long hours. When he came home, he was tired. Lena talked more than Daniel did. She spoke about plans, about budgets, about the future. I listened. I always listened. One evening, Daniel mentioned work stress. Without thinking, I said, "You used to feel better after long walks, remember?" He smiled faintly. "That was a long time ago, Mom." That sentence stayed with me. I began to realize something painful. Daniel was building a new life, and I was not part of the blueprint. Money slowly entered our conversations. At first, casually. Groceries, electricity, internet. Lena would mention costs while scrolling on her phone. "We should probably split this better," she'd say. Daniel would nod. I would agree. I paid without complaint. not because I had to, but because it felt easier than questioning my role. One night, Daniel said, "We're trying to save." "For what?" I asked gently. "For the future," he replied. I didn't ask whose future he meant. Sometimes I missed Michael deeply. He would have noticed the change. He would have said something early. But I had learned to endure, to wait, to hope things would fix themselves. Lena began working from home. She took calls in the living room. I adjusted my movements around her schedule. I walked quietly. I turned down the television. I waited. I didn't want to be in the way. One afternoon, while making lunch, I tried to start a conversation. "I was thinking of visiting your aunt next month," I said to Daniel. "That's nice," he replied, distracted. Lena added, "Just let us know in advance. We like planning." Planning. Another. I stopped playing music. I stopped asking questions. Peace, I had learned, often came at the cost of silence. One afternoon, Lena stood in the doorway of my room. "Do you have plans for the future?" she asked. "Plans?" I repeated. She nodded. "You know, eventually." Eventually. I looked at her. "I live here," I said gently. "For now," she replied. She didn't sound cruel. That was what made it worse. That night, I thought again about the wedding, about the secrecy, about how easily they had removed me from a moment that mattered. I realized something painful. They hadn't forgotten to tell me. They had chosen not to. That understanding settled into me quietly, like a truth that had been waiting its turn. And I knew then that whatever came next would change everything. After Lena asked me about my plans for the future, something inside me shifted. Not sharply, not suddenly. It was like a quiet click, the kind you hear when a door locks behind you. I began to understand that I was no longer being included in the idea of us. I was being prepared for an exit. I didn't confront them right away. That surprised even me. But confrontation had never been my strength. I had survived my life by adapting, not challenging. So I watched. I listened. I learned. The rent payment started the following month. Daniel transferred the money electronically. On time, exact, impersonal. He didn't hand it to me, didn't meet my eyes. It felt less like help and more like a transaction, as if something sacred had been reduced to numbers on a screen. Lena seemed relieved once the payments began. She spoke more confidently, more openly, as if the money had purchased permission. She updated the whiteboard on the refrigerator. New rules appeared. Guests limits, shared space guidelines, noise expectations. I stood in front of it one morning, reading each line carefully, wondering when my home had become a place where I needed permission. Daniel never questioned the board. He never defended me. That silence hurt more than any argument could have. Dinner changed. We no longer ate together by default. Meals were staggered, planned. Sometimes eaten alone in separate rooms. I missed the sound of conversation at the table, even meaningless conversation. One evening, I suggested we eat together. "Just tonight," I said. Lena glanced at Daniel. He hesitated. "We're both pretty tired," he said. I nodded. Of course they were. I started noticing how often I apologized. Sorry for being in the kitchen. Sorry for using the living room. Sorry for asking questions. Each apology made me feel smaller. Yet they came automatically, like muscle memory. I began to move differently in the house, quieter, more carefully, as if the walls belonged to someone else, as if I were a guest who had stayed too long. One afternoon, while cleaning out a drawer, I found an old school photo of Daniel. He couldn't have been more than 8. Missing teeth, bright smile. I sat on the floor holding it and cried. Not loudly, just deeply. Later that day, Daniel mentioned friends coming over. "They'll stay for dinner," he said. I cooked. I cleaned. I prepared the house. When the guests arrived, Lena greeted them warmly. "This is our place," she said with a smile. I stood behind her, invisible. During dinner, someone asked how long they had been married. Daniel answered easily. Lena smiled. No one looked at me. No one noticed. After they left, I sat alone in the living room. The house felt hollow. Not empty, dismissive. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed years of my life in my mind. The sacrifices, the patience, the belief that love would be returned in the same shape it was given. I realized something painful. Love doesn't always come back. Sometimes it just moves on. The next week, Daniel handed me an envelope. Inside was a printed agreement, a rental arrangement, terms, dates, conditions. I stared at it for a long time. "You want me to sign this?" I asked quietly. "It's just to keep things clear," he said. Clear. That word again. I looked at my son, the boy I had protected from storms, the man now standing across from me with paperwork. "I need time," I said. He nodded. Lena watched silently from the doorway. That night, I sat at the kitchen table until morning. The agreement lay in front of me. Every word felt like a quiet dismissal. You are temporary. You are replaceable. You are a problem to manage. In the early hours of the sky lightened, I made a decision. Not out of anger, out of dignity. The next day, I asked them both to sit down. My hands shook slightly, but my voice stayed steady. "I won't be signing this," I said. They looked surprised. "I have supported you willingly," I continued, "but I will not reduce myself to a tenant in my own home." Daniel opened his mouth, closed it. Lena spoke. "So what are you saying?" she asked. "I'm saying things will change," I replied. I told them I would no longer cover shared expenses. I told them they needed to make their own plans. I told them I deserved honesty. My voice never rose. That seemed to frighten them. Daniel said I was being dramatic. Lena said I was overreacting. I listened quietly. Then I said the truth. "You married me without me, and now you want to push me out." The room went silent. Later that evening, Lena said something I will never forget. "If this isn't working for you," she said calmly, "maybe you should consider other options." Other options. In my own home. I nodded slowly. "I already have," I replied. That night, I packed a small bag. Not to leave forever, just to remind myself I could. As I closed my bedroom door, I understood something clearly. The turning point wasn't the wedding. It wasn't the rent. It was the moment I stopped shrinking. I didn't leave the house that night. The bag I packed stayed by the door. It was never meant to be an escape. It was a reminder that I still had choices. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. The house was silent. No footsteps, no voices. Just the soft hum of the refrigerator and the slow ticking of the clock. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, exactly where I had sat for years. But something inside me felt different. Lighter. Clearer. Daniel came into the kitchen an hour later. He looked tired, older than his years. He poured coffee and sat across from me. Neither of us spoke for a bit. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he finally said. "I know," I replied. And I did know. That didn't make it hurt less. He told me things had moved fast, that he loved Lena, that he didn't know how to balance everything. I listened without interrupting. I had learned that listening was often more powerful than speaking. I just wanted peace, he said. So did I answered. Our eyes met. For a moment, I saw the boy he used to be. Then Lena walked in. She sat down carefully, as if choosing her posture would change the outcome. She spoke politely, almost kindly, but there was distance in her voice. "We need to talk about boundaries," she said. I smiled faintly. "We already are," I replied. I told them what I had been carrying quietly for months, how invisible I felt, how painful the secret wedding was, how being asked for rent had changed everything. I spoke slowly, calmly. No accusations, just truth. Lena crossed her arms. "I never meant to make you feel unwanted," she said. "But this is our marriage." I nodded. "And this is my home." The room felt heavy. Not angry, just full. Full of unsaid things that had finally found air. Daniel rubbed his face with his hands. "I don't know what you want us to do," he said. I took a breath. "I want honesty," I replied. "I want respect. And I want to stop pretending this is working." Lena leaned back in her. For a moment, no one spoke. "You're asking us to leave?" Daniel asked. "I'm asking you to grow," I said gently. "You're married. You deserve your own life. And I deserve my own peace." Lena laughed quietly, not cruelly, just nervously. "You're serious," she said. "Yes," I replied. The conversation didn't turn loud. It didn't turn dramatic. It turned practical. They asked how long they had. I gave them time. Enough to plan, enough to save, enough to leave with dignity. In the days that followed, the house changed again, but this time it felt like movement forward, not tension. Boxes appeared, lists were made, phone calls happened behind closed doors. I stayed out of the way, not because I felt small, but because I no longer needed to prove my place. Daniel tried to help more. He cooked once, cleaned quietly. We spoke politely, carefully, like two people learning a new language. One evening, he apologized, not just quickly, not defensively, but honestly. "I forgot how much you gave up for me," he said. I nodded. "That happens," I replied. Lena didn't apologize, but she softened. She stopped correcting me, stopped watching me so closely. Sometimes growth looks like silence. On their last night in the house, we ate dinner together. No tension, no forced smiles, just quiet respect. Daniel hugged me longer than usual. "I hope you'll still be part of our lives," he said. "I will," I replied, but differently. After they left, I walked through the house alone. Every room felt familiar, but no longer heavy. I unpacked the bag by the door. Then I sat down, and for the first time in months, I felt calm. I knew something important had ended, but something stronger had begun. After they moved out, the house went very quiet. Not the uncomfortable kind of quiet, the honest kind. The kind that lets you hear your own breath again. The first morning alone felt strange. I woke up early, as I always had, out of habit, out of years of responsibility. But this time, there was no rush. No one needed breakfast, no one needed space, no one needed explanations. I stood in the kitchen holding my coffee. Sunlight came through the window, the same window I had looked through 1,000 times before, but this time I noticed it, really noticed it. I sat at the table and listened to the silence, and for the first time in a long while, it did not scare me. It felt like rest. I won't pretend it was easy. Some evenings were heavy. There were moments when the house felt too big, too empty. Grief does not disappear just because you make the right choice. Sometimes it stays, quietly. I missed Daniel. Not the man he had become, but the boy he once was. The boy who used to run into the house after school. The boy who believed his mother could fix anything. There were days I replayed everything in my mind. The secret wedding, the rent conversation, the whiteboard rules. I asked myself if I could have done something differently, if I should have spoken sooner, if silence had cost me more than words ever could. But regret is a tricky thing. It keeps you looking backward, and I had already spent too much time doing that. So I started small. I cleaned one room at a time, not because it needed it, but because movement helped. Order helped. I donated clothes I no longer wore. I packed away things that belonged to a past version of me. I kept only what felt honest. One afternoon, I found myself laughing. It surprised me. It came out suddenly while watching something silly on television. I hadn't realized how long it had been since laughter felt natural. I began taking walks in the evenings, just around the block, slow, unhurried. Neighbors waved. Some stopped to talk. I let myself be seen again. Daniel called a few weeks later. His voice sounded different, more grounded, less rushed. "We found a place," he said. I told him I was glad, and I meant it. He asked how I was doing. I paused before answering. Then I told the truth. "I'm learning," I said. "Learning to live for myself." Lena came up briefly in the conversation. He said she was adjusting, that marriage was harder than they expected. I listened without judgment. Some lessons must be lived. After the call, I sat quietly for a while. I realized something important. Letting go had not broken my bond with my son. It had changed it. And change does not always mean loss. Sometimes it means balance. Weeks passed, then months. The house slowly became mine again. Not the version shaped around others, but the version shaped around peace. I moved furniture, painted one wall, planted flowers in the yard. Small things, but they felt powerful. One evening, while folding laundry, I thought about all the women like me, mothers who give and give and give until they forget what it feels like to receive. We are taught that love means sacrifice, and sometimes it does, but love should never require disappearance. I learned that boundaries are not punishment. They have protection, not just from others, but from losing yourself. I also learned that staying quiet does not always make things kinder. Sometimes it only makes them heavier. Daniel visits now, not often, but intentionally. When he comes, we talk, really talk, not about obligations, but about life. He listens differently, and so do I. Lena remains polite, distant, but respectful, and that is enough. Peace does not always come in close snatches. Sometimes it comes in close spaces. On the anniversary of my husband's passing, I lit a candle. I sat alone and I spoke to him softly. I told him I was okay, that I had learned to stand again. I realized something else that night. Strength does not always look loud. Sometimes it looks like staying calm when your heart is breaking. Sometimes it looks like choosing dignity over comfort. If there is one lesson I would leave behind, it is this. Love your children deeply. Support them. Believe in them. But never shrink yourself to keep them comfortable. You are allowed to take up space, even in your own home, especially in your own life. I did not lose my family. I found myself, and that made all the difference.